Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be responding to a recent story of mine that I shared on Instagram where I mentioned that I hadn't been as active because I got a new pet and I've been bonding with them, so I figured today's the day I'm going to introduce you to them. So the last day and a half in particular, I've been especially rearranging like their little cage in their area so that way you can see them clearly. I'm pretty excited. I'm happy with the layout and I hope you like it too. So here we are. We have their little hut and they have a little log that they can crawl on. And oh, in the back, here we have their little stoop where they got their water. And oh, I don't know where they went. Hold on one second. Okay, so I found them in the kitchen. This is Mabel. She's a little corn snake. And I'm gonna put her back in her home so you can see her. So they're a fully posable corn snake in an interactive terrarium set. And I will actually be holding a tester call for a pattern release soon. So keep a lookout. I did want to come on and give a quick rundown of how I got to where I was at. So I've seen some patterns already coming out in regards to Year of the Snake, different crochet snakes, but they all, with a few exceptions, are just a snake. The snake can only do so much. It's either a long tube, it might curl, it might have a different shaped head, might have a different shaped face. But there's only so much you can do with a snake. Now, to put my own personal touch on it, I wanted to do more than the snake. I preferred to do something a little more, a little bigger, and I couldn't really make like a snake chubby pretty much through the holidays, and I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to put out a picture on Instagram. I didn't want to tell anybody what I was doing because I didn't want it to be replicated. I wanted to just wait until I was ready, and I put feelers out and I said like, hey, I got a new pet, and I had so many people be like, oh my god, it's so cool. And that's like my thing. And realistically I'm like, okay, 7 rows of this, then you increase, and 7 rows of this. Okay, we're gonna sew this here, and like I'm trying to do all the math and get it ready so that way when I do announce this, the tester call will be up. Last year, and I can't believe it's already been almost a year, in January on my Instagram I debuted my Chubs, the huggable chubby no-sew dragon, and I didn't release it. There was a lot of chaos happening with seeing my sad hamsters. That kind of took over the majority of my spring months, so I wasn't able to release my Chubs pattern until close to May. But that being said, that is available on my Etsy. If you're interested, I have a baby version named Bubs as well. It's a 2 pattern pack. I couldn't think of how I'd make a snake chubby to keep that same look, so I was like, I'll just make a snake more realistic in shape, but I didn't want to just have like a little tube, you know what I mean? Almost like a little worm. I didn't want just that, so I wanted to add more to it. Made a tray to mimic the bottom of the acrylic casing because I obviously can't replicate that. I'm not going to make walls for a snake at a crochet. There's no point because the habitats are usually clear, right? So I didn't want to do all that. I didn't want to make it complicated so that nobody wants to replicate it. Nobody wants to make the pattern. Nobody wants it. Little kids aren't going to play with it if they can't like easily access it. You're not going to put it on your desk and move it around if you've got to move this and then rotate this and move this up and like overcomplicated. So I wanted it to be simple, and I made a few things that I had seen in common, which were a log with some kind of greenery on it. Typically they're longer, but I also wanted to make that hut, which I've seen so many snakes in pet stores and animal shelters like kind of crawl through and burrow themselves in when they're sleeping. And I wanted to make sort of a little ledge in the base color, which would replicate the dirt, the stuffing, what have you, the bottom layer of the cage. And I wanted to have a little almost inclined where their water is, because that's typically, it's either in like stone or it's a part of the base fixture itself that I was thinking as realistic as I could with what I had. Do not have to use the pipe cleaners. I like the idea of the pipe cleaners because I could fold the snake and pose the snake in the scene, and I didn't have to worry about it becoming as undone. And just do it without a pipe cleaner and stuff it with polyfill. That will work too, because I tested it out. It just won't, depending on how you stuff it, it won't stay in place as much. Not that it can't, it just won't stay in place as much. Comment if you would make a snake. I know a lot of people get kind of anxious around real snakes because of how you feed them, what you feed them. If you would like a no fuss snake with your own little terrarium, definitely stay tuned. The pieces as well I wanted to add are movable. You don't have to keep them stationary and sewn in place like I did. I secured it because I thought it would be easier for me to show it off and for me to keep it for markets or whatnot. But you can make the pieces and move them around. Again, to explain how I did what I did. So I started off with the mat. You can't see because I attached all the pieces, but I'll explain it. It's about 10 by 8. I did it in brown. I outlined it in black. Made a separate panel. Excuse the fuzz. Separate panel in black. Attached them together after I did the outlining of the tray. So we got like a front loop, maybe a few rows. I gotta double check exactly how I lengthened this, but then I attached the black on the bottom. So otherwise you'd see the same thing you're seeing on this end, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to look like a legitimate cage and area. So that's what we have here. Right here we have their like a little hut you can use. You don't have to secure it. I did because I preferred it to look that way. The only one that I would recommend you actually sew down if you make this pattern is the log, because depending on how you close it, it could flop over. So in order to keep it stabilized, I would at least sew this one down. This you can move and manipulate around the rest of the mat. Same goes with this little stoop. So it's like a semicircle that I added the little water attachment to. It's only heightened on one side. I don't know if you can see that right here. Whereas this side, it's flush. So I was able to sew it and it gave that elevated step look here. Only one that I would recommend you actually sew down to the base would be the log. Other than that, you can completely move around and play with this however you want, and I think it'd be great for kids. But if you are going to give it to kids and you didn't want to have to worry, you can sew it all down. Or if you wanted it to look a certain way, secure it. As far as the snake goes, I used 3 6-inch long pipe cleaners. Now that's only because I only had 6-inch pipe cleaners. I didn't have anything more. If I had maybe a 12-inch or 18-inch ones that you can find like at craft stores, I ordered mine off Amazon. Obviously it would be different. You don't need the pipe cleaner. I like the pipe cleaner because I can manipulate the body and to look like a real snake. Like here we have here. I can twirl it around something and it'll mostly stay in place. Okay. Now, if you don't use the pipe cleaner, it will give you the same effect depending on how you stuff it. It just won't be as rigid in its placement as it would be if you used a pipe cleaner. But again, you don't need to use the pipe cleaner. You can just stuff it. If you do stuff it at all, I use just the pipe cleaner. I didn't use any polyfill, but if you do use polyfill, you only need a little bit. You won't need that much because the body is so narrow. We're talking like 4 at its widest part, 6 stitches. At its shortest, 3 stitches. So you don't need like to go crazy with polyfill, but I embroidered the eyes. I attached a little tongue, secured it fully through the body. I didn't just sew it in and clip it, call it a day. You have to secure that, because otherwise, if say like a kid pulls on it, that's gonna come loose and you don't want that. This is how it all comes together, and I'm very excited about it. And if you're interested, definitely check out my pattern. I have a few more in the works and I'm very excited. So it's officially release day for my pattern, My First Snake, with an interactive playmat. For all of the snakes that I use in my photos, I did include a pipe cleaner just to show how you can manipulate the body and whatnot and have it stay in place. However, the majority of my testers did not use a pipe cleaner, so that's something to keep in mind, and you can see the difference. I include instructions on how to make the snake regardless of whether or not you use the pipe cleaner, and how you can manipulate the body to keep it in place if you choose not to. Here is a few other snakes that I've placed on the mat. I have this pink one right here that I used some chalk pastels to make a little more texture. I also show instructions in the pattern on how to create this textured ridge, because I understand the majority of the pattern is worked up in 4 to 6 stitches, and I know for a lot of people that's really small. So if you use this texture almost as if you're going in the front loop, it gives it more of a snake skin look. The regular stitching is right here. You can see the difference right in this middle section versus here with the ridge. And I chose to sew down all my accessories, but you do not have to. I know there were some of my testers who also did not sew down their accessories. One in particular who wanted her granddaughter to play with the set and she could move it however she wanted. And that was very exciting to see that it was already going to a loving home. I also decided to include instructions in the pattern for how to make a custom size mat. So this one here measures 10 by 8, at least the dirt. And then I obviously extended this a little bit to make the outside ridge. And then the bottom part that you whip stitch around is also 10 by 8. But I understand my tension can be different than anybody else's, and some of my testers use thinner yarn like Posh or acrylic. And so what they had to do was change the stitch count to accommodate that factor. So what I did was I included a page, I believe it's page 9 of the pattern, that discusses how to extend it, whether you want to make it wider, you want to make it thinner, width-wise, and then how to elongate it based off those measurements, and then how to calculate how many stitches you'll do in the round for the edge of the tray. Because if you make it thinner or you make it wider than mine, the stitch count's going to be different when you go around the corners, and to keep yourself from having it curl inwards or flop outwards, this helps a lot. I'm very excited. If you're interested in learning more about the pattern, definitely check out my Etsy shop. If you like this video and seeing this process, definitely give it a like. I would be greatly appreciative of that. And if you're interested in checking out more of my crochet journey and some new upcoming patterns that I have, I'm very excited about, and I will be sharing them soon. Definitely keep an eye out on my channel. Have a good day.